Week 8 of the 2024 NFL season has kicked off, and fantasy managers are navigating another challenging week of injuries, particularly among wide receivers. Godwin and Brandon Aiyuk are out for the season, while Mike Evans and DK Metcalf are likely to miss multiple weeks. Additionally, Deebo Samuel, Demario Douglas, and Juju Smith-Schuster had minimal participation before exiting their respective games. Week 8 Fantasy Football Quarterback Rankings. Stack up. Bo Nix has established himself as a reliable option, finishing as a top 20 quarterback in 5 of his 7 starts, including 3 top 13 outings in his last 5 games. He's a solid streaming choice against a Panthers defense that has allowed the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Stock up. Tua Tagovailoa returns this week to face the Cardinals, who have given up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. Notably, 3 passers have scored over 23 points against Arizona. Stock down. Patrick Mahomes continues to struggle, finishing as the QB19 in Week 7 and ranking QB14 or lower for 11 consecutive games. While a matchup with the Raiders offers some hope, trusting Mahomes as anything more than a QB2 remains difficult. Stock down. Anthony Richardson has disappointed fantasy owners, ranking QB19 or lower in 3 of his 4 full games this season. Despite the Texans' generosity towards quarterbacks, starting Richardson necessitates a significant amount of trust. Week 8 Fantasy Football Running Back Rankings. Stock up. Kareem Hunt has been on fire, totaling 200 scrimmage yards and 3 touchdowns on 52 touches over the last 2 games. Expect the Chiefs to rely heavily on him against a Raiders defense that allows the 7th most fantasy points to running backs. Stock up. Javonte Williams broke out for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Saints in Week 7. He faces a Panthers defense that is giving up the highest average of half PPR points to running backs. Stock down. Chuba Hubbard enjoyed a hot streak when Andy Dalton took over at quarterback, finishing as a top 10 back for 3 consecutive games. However, with a tough matchup against the Broncos and Bryce Young returning under center, Hubbard's outlook dims. Stock down. Devin Singletary's snap count dropped to 22%, leading to only 6 touches in Week 7, as he shares duties with Tyrone Tracy Jr. Most leagues will have better waiver options than Singletary this week. Here are the Week 8 Fantasy Football wide receiver rankings. Stock up. George Pickens shone with 5 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown in his first game with Russell Wilson. He ranks among the top 15 players against the Giants. Stock up. Romeo Doubs led the Packers in targets, air yards, and routes in Week 7. He's an enticing option against a Jaguar secondary that allows the 4th most points to wide receivers. Stock down. Josh Downs had a promising stretch with Joe Flacco, but saw a sharp decline upon Anthony Richardson's return, managing just 1 catch for 3 yards. Downs is more of a bench stash than a starter at this point. Stock down. Wan'Dale Robinson recorded a season-low 5.3 half PPR points in Week 7 and faces a tough challenge against the Steelers, who have allowed the 10th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Week 8 Fantasy Football Tight End Rankings. Stock up. Cade Otton had a breakout game in Week 7 with season highs across the board. With Godwin sidelined and Mike Evans out until Week 12, Otton is poised for a bigger role. Stack up. David Njoku tied for the most targets in the league last week, finishing with a solid performance. With Jameis Winston starting and facing the Ravens, who allow the most receiving yards to tight ends, Njoku is a prime candidate to excel. Stock down. Dalton Kincaid has struggled to find his footing, finishing as TE14 or lower consistently and failing to surpass 60 receiving yards in any game. While the matchup isn't terrible, Kincaid is better considered as a TE2 at this stage.